Welcome. Another great video talking about how not to run out of money in retirement. We'll go through 4 detailed tips on how to do exactly that. Kevin, let's just jump right in. It's a scary topic. Running out of money in retirement, so scary. In fact, some people think it's worse than death.
Yeah, I don't even want to go into that point. Everybody always, well, will I run out of money? How much do I need? What's going to go on? Well, if we take a look here, Alliance conducted a survey of Americans between 44 and 75, sort of that Gen X right through baby boomer scenario. Which do you fear most? Outliving your money in retirement or death? And as we can see, 60% plus said they're more scared of outliving their money than they are dying. That becomes a huge factor. Everybody wants to know a definitive answer as to how much money do I need and will I outlive it? I mean, that's a big question that everybody wants to know. And again, there are tips that we should look at for how to deal with this, aren't there?
We should. And let's just get right in. The first one, and this might seem a little obvious, but we're going to break it down to some detail here that should hopefully be helpful. But if you have appropriate budget or realistic budget, keyword realistic, that can certainly help out with the process. And we'll break down budget into kind of 2 categories, kind of budgeting while you're still planning for retirement. So you're not retired yet, you're thinking about retirement, would be some tips to help with that budget. And then once you're in retirement, some tips to help out with that budget as well. Because often coming up with a number, Kevin, people can't predict the future. Like, well, I don't know what life's going to be like 10, 20 years from now. And they can use that as a deterrent as why not to budget when the budget is a very important piece of not running out of money. So the first tip, you're planning for retirement, you're not retired yet. Don't worry too much about 20 years from now. Worry about today.
Yeah, your current lifestyle, because the beginning of your retirement, you have to maintain that. Now, no, you're not going to work every day. You're not driving the car every day, but maybe you're doing other things. You're volunteering someplace, so you're going there. You're looking at, getting together with friends a little more often than maybe you did because a lot of you are retired. Maybe you're playing pickleball or whatever the case may be. So your lifestyle may not change that much. You may be able to do a few more things that you did. So maintaining that is a realistic view. There's no point in saying, you're in $100,000 a year and all of a sudden you're going to hit retirement. Oh, I can live on 30. That's probably not realistic and probably ain't going to happen. So you got to plan with that scenario. Now, as you get further on in time, you may be able to find a few of those things, but make sure that that current lifestyle is counted into at least the first year, or if not the first few years of how you think your retirement's going to be.
Yeah, and then as you go through retirement, right, your budget's not carved in stone. You don't have to do it once and then forget about it for life. Update it. We find this quite frequently with our clientele who are newly retired, 12 months, 18 months, you live retirement, you find out, you know what, I'm not spending as much as I thought here, I'm taking a few more trips thought, or whatever the adjustment is. It's very frequent occurrence that those numbers get adjusted. So prior to retirement, to make the budget realistic, focus on your current situation because that's likely going to be maintained. And then once you're in retirement, revisit it after a year and a half, because the numbers are probably going to be adjusted as you live retirement. You find out really what is a fit and what's not a fit. So you don't want to run out of money. You need to get a pretty good idea of where you're spending it so you can grasp the budget and do some according planning. A second tip here, Kevin, we're a little biased because we're in the wealth management industry, but invest the money. That's going to help out.
Yeah, I mean, a big factor, everybody seems to think of it, okay, well, you invest all the way up to you retire, and then when you retire, that's it, nothing more. You just stop. It's just like pure cash, and I'm just going to drain that pool till it goes to zero. Well, that's not the case. I mean, when you hit retirement, usually you're not looking at retirement for a year, which that might work good for. I mean, if you're retiring at 60, your average age, you're in your mid-80s, you got 20 to 30 years of retirement time frame that you have to look at. So you have to invest appropriately. GICs probably won't be anything that can cut it, just because, I got a fixed rate, but is that going to supply what you need when you count a few other odds and ends later? But yeah, your time horizon is huge. You can't just project, and say, well, just give me up to 80 because most of my family's done to 80. Well, that's fine. We'll give you that projection. But if you live to 95, now all of a sudden you may have a very different scenario as to what you can take out each and every year.
Yeah, so if you don't want to run out of money in retirement, you have to make sure you understand your time horizon correctly, right? If you undershoot the time horizon and say, hey, I only need money for 10, 15 years, who cares about when I'm 85, 90? Well, that's the wrong mentality. It's a good way to, in fact, run out of money in retirement. To do the opposite, make sure you have a firm grasp on that. And it's likely measured in decades, 20, 30 years, not 5, 10. No. And if you're going to, like you said, manage the money for that appropriate time horizon, you're going to have to find ways to manage risk. Now, risk doesn't mean that it never goes down. You could have a bad year or 2 bad years. You can handle that within that time horizon, but manage risk appropriately in terms of diversification of the portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. The idea is not here to get a 90% return. It's to make sure that you don't have big losses. And then the second one here, and this is usually key for retirees, is you're generating income year in and year out. that diversification, having a portion that's really low risk, maybe even in cash or a short-term item, can help you generate that cash. While some of the other investments, if there is a turbulent time, you can leave those ones alone, let them recover, and you can take from that portion. So ways to manage risk. I went through two, the diversification, and then for the income side, what sometimes folks call cash damming, are key ideas there to make sure that you don't run out of money, you invest appropriately, not just for a year or two, but for the entirety of your retirement, which is likely going to be a few decades. We're still under the same tip here, still under the investment category, tip number 2, but related to that, Kevin, is this ugly thing called inflation.
Yeah, that's another factor. Everybody's got to start to take a look sooner or later and maintain what inflation is. I mean, it's all nice and happy to say that, you know what, I can survive on 20 grand or 30 grand a year or 40 grand a year now. Well, what is 40 grand a year 40 years from now or 20 years from now? Decades will have an impact with the way inflation runs, even at a low number. The lower the number, I mean, 2.5, as we see on the chart below here, 20 years from now, it's 163. So if you're spending 100 today, you need 163 in 20 years, and you need over double that amount of money in 30 years. Yeah. So again, you have to make sure that if you're setting something up and you're looking down the road, you are planning for what inflation will do. Even at a small number, inflation can have a huge factor on eroding what you've got for your savings as you're in retirement. So that is usually worked in to maintain that your plan is there going forward, that you have an inflation factor so that you don't run out of money. Because, yeah, I mean, again, if we're sitting there on 50 grand now, well, as we can see, you got to add another 63 or so. I mean, you're closer to that 80 to 90 grand by the time you're 20 years older down the road. Let's hope you have the money to be able to do just what you're doing today at that time frame.
Yeah, and nothing wrong with GICs. We mentioned that a couple of times, but the idea being that if you want to keep up with inflation, well, you might need a larger pot of money then if your goal is to be solely in GICs than if you had other types of investments. So nothing wrong with that, but you just have to keep in mind under the investment category, inflation is going to be an impact on retirement. If you have questions like this, or really any questions in the financial world, get a hold of us, Kevin, myself, the whole team, chatwithclintonkevin.com. We'd love to hear from you. That comes right to us. We do our best to get back to you as fast as we can. So please do reach out, chatwithclintonkevin.com. We went through 2 tips here, Kevin. Let's get on to tip number 3 here. You don't want to run out of money in retirement. Well, increase the size of your pensions. That's a good way to handle it.
Yeah, and as we just mentioned, some of the ideas there with investment as well as inflation. Well, pension. What does Canada Pension Plan and the OAS give you? They give you guaranteed income protected, inflation protected, lifelong money. So if you were going to plan at 65, maybe you're waiting till 70 so that you increase the amount that you're going to get, and you're going to get that amount increased, inflation adjusted for the rest of your life. So maybe you're spending some of your savings up front, and you know that you're not going to have to worry about that later because you're putting this off till that point in time. So again, guaranteed, inflation adjusted, lifelong. By taking these kind of government pensions and delaying them for a bit, you're going to get more money in your pocket, and it's going to last you that lifetime, hopefully.
Yeah, and they're lifelong pensions. So, right, if you delay them, you get the guaranteed income. If you happen to live to 92, well, they're going to keep paying out, and they'll be inflation adjusted. So if you're worried about it, that could be one strategy to factor in. Another to consider is often, not for everyone, but for a lot of folks we work with, they do have equity in their property. They've built out a home over decades, paid it off, the mortgage is gone, they have all this equity in the house. Well, one way to help with the budget, you downsize. It gives you access to the equity in the home. Also, often the new place, whether it's a rental, a condo, whatever the new place is, often has lower living expenses, which helps out with the budget as well. So a few ways there, downsizing might work. This isn't for everyone, but certainly if you're worried about running out of money in retirement, one thing to consider would be how you handle your real estate. And a frequent solution there is to downsize, so you lower your living expenses in the new place, plus you get all that equity from the home, which now can help fund the actual retirement, right? You can actually have some cash you can spend as opposed to just having it in bricks and mortar. Anything you want to add to that category?
Yeah, no, I mean, and the other factor, like I say, a lot of times as we age, we don't move quite as well. So if you have a 2-story home, maybe you want a bungalow instead. You know, you don't want to deal with these stairs, a lot of the other odds and ends that are going on. So downsizing can become, and again, it's not necessarily right after you retire, but, you know, 20 years down the road, if you're in your 80s, you may not want what you want when you were in your 60s. So again, downsizing is another way that you can, as Clint said, realize and capture equity in your home that you can utilize towards your retirement to continue going forward. And that may be part of your plan or not. But as we've mentioned, this all leads to the one place, the Becker Orr mantra: you need to have a plan in place for your retirement. That is a big factor to deal with. That is going to give you that scenario where we're projecting what is the inflation that we're looking at, how many years are we looking to go down the road, and what kind of income do you need? We can run projections along those lines, but making that plan is the big factor that you have to do to maintain that you are not going to run out of money when you hit retirement, right, Clint?
That is key. You don't want to run out of money in retirement. All of the 4 factors we talked about certainly would be helpful, but pulling all of that together in a plan that's specifically customized for you is really the end solution, right? You get that fully functional financial plan, kind of more of a solidified approach that you won't actually run out of funds in retirement. We do lots of videos of this nature. Hopefully you like this one. Another one very much related, which I think you'll like, is going to be how much will I spend in retirement? Spending in retirement, another big category. You can click on that video right now, and we'll be back again soon. Take care, everybody.